Mark Reynolds made a simple choice that night. He just wanted peace. He wanted a single dinner without the constant buzzing of emails, the relentless ring of clients, and the glow of a screen. He left his smartphone on the kitchen counter, screen down, and walked out the door for a quick bite with an old friend. He thought he was reclaiming 2 hours of his life. He didn't realize he was losing everything else. When he walked back into his quiet suburban home, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. His wife, Sarah, was gone. And the secret she left behind would shatter his reality forever. The decision felt rebellious, almost juvenile. But Mark needed it. He stood in the hallway of his colonial-style home in Oak Creek, staring at the iPhone 15 Pro Max resting on the marble island. It buzzed again, a message from his VP of sales, probably about the Q3 projections. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "Not tonight," he whispered to the empty kitchen. Sarah was upstairs, likely folding laundry or reading one of those dense historical biographies she loved. He yelled up the stairs, "Honey, I'm heading to meet Liam at the Rusty Anchor. I'm leaving my phone here. If the office calls the landline, tell them I died." He heard her soft laugh drift down from the master bedroom. "Don't tempt fate, Mark. Have fun. Don't drink too much whiskey." "Love you," he called out. "Love you too," she replied. Her voice was light, airy, normal. That was the last time he heard it. Mark stepped out into the crisp October air. He drove his Audi to the restaurant, feeling a strange sense of liberation. For 2 hours he was just Mark, not CEO Mark Reynolds, not the guy who fixed everyone's problems. He sat in a booth with Liam, his best friend since college, eating steak and laughing about the good old days before mortgages and cholesterol checks. "You look relaxed," Liam noted, swirling his scotch. "Rare look on you." "Left the phone at home," Mark grinned. "It's like I've severed a limb, but it feels good." They parted ways around 9:15 p.m. Mark drove home, humming along to the radio, feeling recharged. He pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. That was odd. Sarah usually left the porch light on. Maybe she'd gone to bed early. She had been complaining about migraines lately. He unlocked the front door. "Sarah, I'm home." Silence. Not the comfortable silence of a sleeping house, but the heavy, stagnant silence of an abandoned one. The air felt cold. He walked into the kitchen. His phone was still on the counter where he'd left it. He tapped the screen. 14 missed calls, 22 text messages. But they weren't from his office. They were all from Sarah. A knot tightened in his stomach instantly. His fingers trembled as he unlocked the phone. 7:15 p.m. "Mark, pick up." 7:17 p.m. "Please, Mark. Answer." 7:20 p.m. "He's here." 7:22 p.m. "Mark, I can't talk. I have to go. Don't come looking for me yet." 7:30 p.m. "I love you. I'm so sorry." Mark stared at the screen, his breath hitching in his throat. "He's here. Who was he?" "Sarah!" he screamed, sprinting up the stairs. He threw open the bedroom door. The bed was made. Her book was on the nightstand, open to page 142. A half-drunk cup of herbal tea sat next to it, cold. He ran to the closet. Her clothes were there. Her suitcase was there. Her passport, usually kept in the small safe in the corner, was gone. He ran back downstairs, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He checked the back door. It was unlocked. Sarah was a stickler for security. She never left the back door unlocked. He stood in the center of his living room, the sanctuary they had built together over 10 years of marriage, and felt the walls closing in. He dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. He called Liam. "Mark, you just left. What's up?" "She's gone, Liam. Sarah's gone." "What do you mean gone? Like to the store?" "No," Mark choked out, tears stinging his eyes. "She sent me texts. Someone was here. She took her passport. Liam, I left my phone. If I had my phone, I could have stopped it. Call the police, Liam said, his voice dropping an octave. Now. Mark hung up and dialed 911. As he waited for the dispatcher, he noticed something on the floor near the mudroom entrance. He walked over and picked it up. It was a man's cufflink. Gold with a small ruby in the center. It looked expensive, antique, and Mark had never seen it before in his life. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the neighborhood, casting long, dancing shadows across the manicured lawns of Oak Creek. Detective Miller, a man with tired eyes and a suit that looked like it had been slept in, stood in Mark's kitchen. "Let me get this straight, Mr. Reynolds," Miller said, looking up from his notepad. "You left the house at 7 p.m. Your wife was home. You went to dinner, leaving your phone behind, which is convenient. And when you returned, she was gone." "It wasn't convenient," Mark snapped, running a hand through his hair. "It was a break. I'm a CEO. I needed a break." "And the texts?" Miller asked. "May I see them again?" Mark handed over the phone. Miller scrolled through them, his expression unreadable. "He's here. Do you have any idea who he might be?" "No. Sarah doesn't have enemies. She's a pediatric nurse. She volunteers at the animal shelter. Everyone loves her." "Everyone has a past, Mr. Reynolds," Miller said darkly. "Is there anyone she dated before you? An estranged family member?" "Her parents died in a car crash when she was 20. She was an only child. I'm all she has." Miller wandered into the living room, his flashlight sweeping the corners. "We found no signs of forced entry. The back door was unlocked, but not broken. This suggests she either knew the person or she let them in. Or she was forced to open it," Mark countered. "Maybe." Miller paused by the fireplace. "Or maybe she just left." "She didn't just leave. She sent me panic texts." Miller turned to face him. "Mr. Reynolds, in 80% of disappearances involving a spouse, the partner is the first person we look at. You went off the grid for 2 hours. No GPS tracking on your person, no digital footprint, just your word and your friend Liam's word." "Check the restaurant cameras," Mark yelled. "I was there." "We will," Miller said calmly. "But right now, you need to stay in town. Don't go anywhere." The police left around 2 a.m. They took the cufflink into evidence, dusted for prints, and taped off the back door. Mark sat on the couch, staring at the empty fireplace. The silence was back, heavier than before. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the text. "He's here. Who was he?" Mark stood up. He couldn't just sit there. He needed to find something the police missed. He knew Sarah better than anyone. He knew where she hid things. He went to the basement. Sarah had a small crafting studio down there where she painted. It was her sanctuary. He turned on the lights. It smelled of turpentine and lavender. He started opening drawers, paints, brushes, canvases. Nothing. He moved to the bookshelf in the corner. It was filled with old art history books. He pulled them out one by one, shaking them. From a thick copy of Italian Renaissance art, a photo fell out. Mark picked it up. It was a Polaroid, faded and yellowing at the edges. It showed a young Sarah, maybe 19 or 20, standing on a dock. She wasn't smiling. She looked terrified. And she wasn't alone. A man had his arm around her. He was tall, with slicked back dark hair and a sharp, cruel jawline. He was wearing a tuxedo. Mark squinted at the photo. On the man's wrist, just visible under the cuff of his shirt, was a cufflink. Gold, with a ruby in the center. Mark's blood ran cold. He flipped the photo over. On the back, written in Sarah's handwriting, were 3 words. Luca. 2012. Naples. Naples? Sarah had never been to Italy. She told Mark she had never left the country until their honeymoon in Paris. She said she grew up in Ohio. Mark pulled out his phone. He wasn't letting it out of his sight now, and Googled Luca Naples crime. It was a shot in the dark, but the cufflink looked like mafia jewelry. Nothing specific came up, just generic news stories. He tried a different search. He searched for the specific cufflink design. Gold cufflink, ruby crest lion. He scrolled through images. Finally, he found a match on an old auction site for seized assets. The Valenti crime family estate. Seized 2015. Mark dropped the phone on the desk. The Valenti family. One of the most notorious crime syndicates in New York and Italy. Sarah wasn't just a nurse from Ohio. She was connected to the Valentis. Suddenly the house phone rang. The landline. Mark stared at it. It was 3:15 a.m. Nobody called the landline. He picked it up slowly. "Hello? You found the photo?" A voice rasped. It was a man's voice. Deep. Accented. "Good. You're smarter than you look, Reynolds." "Who is this?" Mark demanded, gripping the receiver. "Where is my wife?" "Your wife?" The man laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You mean my fiancée. You've been borrowing her for 10 years, Mark, but the lease is up." "I'm calling the police," Mark said. "Do that, and I send her back to you in pieces," the voice said, deadly serious. "Listen carefully. You want to see her again? You come to the old shipyard at the docks, warehouse 4B. Come alone, no cops, no phones. If I see a glowing screen, she dies." "When?" Mark asked. "Now." The line went dead. Mark didn't hesitate. He grabbed his car keys. He started to reach for his phone, then stopped. No phones. He couldn't risk it. But he couldn't go in defenseless either. He went to the master bedroom closet and reached up to the top shelf. Hidden inside a shoebox was a snub-nosed .38 revolver. He'd bought it years ago after a break-in down the street, fired it twice at a range, and never touched it since. He checked the cylinder. It was loaded. He tucked the gun into the back of his waistband and threw on a jacket. As he drove toward the city docks, the reality of the situation washed over him. Sarah, his gentle, tea-drinking, book-reading Sarah, was engaged to a mobster? It was impossible. She cried when they watched sad movies. She saved spiders from the bathtub. But the photo didn't lie, and neither did the fear in her eyes in that picture. The docks were a ghost town at 4 a.m. Fog rolled off the water, obscuring the streetlights. Mark parked his Audi a block away from warehouse 4B, hidden behind a stack of shipping containers. He walked the rest of the way, his footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. Warehouse 4B was a rusted hulk of corrugated metal. The side door was ajar. Mark took a deep breath, touched the cold steel of the gun at his back, and pushed the door open. Inside, it was dimly lit by a single hanging bulb in the center of the vast space. Under the light, a chair was set up, and in the chair sat Sarah. She was bound with zip ties, her mouth was taped, her eyes were wide with terror. When she saw Mark, she started shaking her head frantically, making muffled noises. Mph. "So the brave husband arrives," the voice echoed from the shadows. A man stepped into the light. It was the man from the photo, older now. His hair was graying at the temples, but the cruel jawline was the same. He wore a pristine suit that looked out of place in the grimy warehouse. "Luca," Mark said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "You know my name." Luca smiled. "She told you. I found your picture." "Ah, sentimental." Luca walked over to Sarah and placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched violently. "Sarah, or Isabella, as I know her, ran away from me a week before our wedding." She took something of mine, something very valuable. I don't have anything of yours, Mark said. She has nothing. We live a simple life. She has a memory, Luca said, tapping his own temple. She saw where I buried the bodies, Mark, metaphorically and literally, and she saw the account numbers. Luca pulled a knife from his pocket, a switchblade. He flicked it open. She thought she could hide in suburbia, change her name, dye her hair, marry a boring businessman. Luca sneered. But nobody leaves the Valenti family. Let her go, Mark said, stepping forward. Take me. I have money. I can transfer you millions right now. Luca laughed. Money? I have more money than God, Mark. This is about respect. She disrespected me. Luca brought the knife to Sarah's throat. A thin line of red appeared on her skin. Mark reached behind his back. I said, let her go. Or what? Luca challenged. You'll throw your car keys at me? Mark pulled the .38. He didn't aim it like they did in movies. He just pointed it at Luca's massive chest. Or I'll kill you. Luca's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected the gun. Drop the knife, Mark commanded. You won't shoot, Luca said, grinning. You're a CEO. You fire people. You don't fire guns. Bang! Mark pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. He missed Luca's chest, but the bullet grazed Luca's shoulder. Luca stumbled back, shouting in pain and dropping the knife. Run, Sarah! Mark screamed, but she couldn't run. She was tied to the chair. Mark sprinted forward, tackling Luca just as the mobster reached for a gun in his jacket. They crashed to the concrete floor. Luca was stronger, heavier. He punched Mark in the face, dazing him. Mark tasted blood. Luca pinned him down, hands around Mark's throat. You little worm! Luca spat, squeezing. Mark's vision started to blur. He scrabbled on the floor, his hand searching for anything. His fingers brushed against the switchblade Luca had dropped. He grabbed it. With his last ounce of strength, he jammed it into Luca's side. Luca gasped, his grip loosening. Mark shoved him off and scrambled to Sarah. He used the knife to slice the zip ties on her wrists and ankles. Mark! She sobbed, ripping the tape off her mouth. Mark, watch out! Mark spun around. Luca was getting up, blood seeping through his suit, his gun now in his hand. Go! Mark shoved Sarah toward the door. Get to the car! Block away, behind the containers! I'm not leaving you! Go! Mark dove behind a crate just as Luca fired. Bullets sparked off the metal. You can't hide, Reynolds! Luca shouted, his voice slurring slightly. My men are 5 minutes away. Mark checked his revolver. 5 shots left. He was pinned down. His wife was running into the night, and a mafia don was hunting him in a warehouse. And the worst part, he realized Sarah hadn't just run away from a bad ex. The way Luca looked at her, it wasn't just anger, it was possession. Mark! Sarah's voice came from the door. She hadn't left. Sarah, get out of here! No! She yelled. Suddenly the warehouse lights went out. Pitch black. I know this building, Luca. Sarah's voice echoed in the darkness, cold and hard, a voice Mark had never heard before. I used to play here when my father ran the docks. You think you're the hunter? You're in my house now. Mark lay in the dark, stunned. Her father ran the docks? The story was just beginning. The warehouse was pitch black, a cavern of steel and silence, broken only by the heavy, ragged breathing of Luca, somewhere in the void. Mark lay flat on the cold concrete, his heart hammering against his ribs like a sledgehammer. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Sarah, he whispered, the sound barely audible. A hand gripped his ankle. Mark nearly kicked out, but the touch was familiar. Strong, assured. It was Sarah, but the grip felt different, tactical. She pulled him, guiding him to crawl to the left. Keep low, she breathed into his ear. There's a service hatch 20 feet away behind the old generator. Move. Luca has a gun, Mark hissed. I know. And he's bleeding. He's angry and sloppy. But his men will be here in less than 3 minutes. We need to vanish. Bang! A muzzle flash lit up the darkness from the center of the room, momentarily revealing Luca's silhouette. He was spinning, firing blindly. Isabella, you can't run from family. The bullet pinged off a metal beam feet above Mark's head. Sarah didn't flinch. She picked up a heavy rusted bolt from the floor and hurled it across the room, to the far right. It clattered loudly against a sheet of tin. Luca spun toward the noise and fired 3 rapid shots. Bang, bang, bang! Now, Sarah commanded. She grabbed Mark's hand and they sprinted, hunched over, through the blackness. Sarah moved with a terrifying familiarity, weaving around crates and machinery she couldn't possibly see. She knew the layout by heart. They reached a heavy iron grate in the floor. Sarah yanked it up. It shouldn't have been possible for her frame, but adrenaline was a hell of a drug. Down. It's a drainage tunnel. It leads to the riverbank. Mark dropped into the murky, foul-smelling water below. Sarah followed, pulling the grate back into place just as the warehouse doors burst open. Beams of high-powered flashlights sliced through the darkness above them. "Boss, you hit!" a new voice shouted from above. "Find them!" Luca roared, his voice echoing down the drain. "Tear this place apart!" Sarah and Mark waded through the sludge in the pitch black. Mark wanted to vomit. He wanted to scream, but he kept moving. Sarah was leading him by the hand, her grip iron tight. They emerged 10 minutes later under a rotting pier, coughing and covered in slime. The cold river air bit into their skin. "My car," Mark gasped. "It's a block away." "Too risky," Sarah said, wiping mud from her face. Her eyes were hard, scanning the perimeter. "They'll have the car under surveillance. We need a new ride." She spotted an old Ford pickup truck parked near a fish market loading dock. The driver was inside the market, arguing with a vendor. The engine was idling to keep the heater on. "Sarah, we can't steal a truck," Mark stammered. "I'm the CEO of Reynolds Tech. I don't steal trucks." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. In the harsh yellow light of the street lamp, she looked like a stranger. "Mark, the man you were an hour ago is dead. If you want to live, you get in the truck." She didn't wait for an answer. She sprinted to the truck, jumped in the driver's seat, and threw it into reverse. Mark scrambled into the passenger seat just as the owner ran out, shouting. Sarah floored it. The tires screeched, and they peeled away from the docks, merging onto the highway, just as black SUVs began swarming the area they had just left. Mark stared at his wife. She was driving with one hand, checking the mirrors constantly. "Who are you?" Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "Because you sure as hell aren't a pediatric nurse." Sarah didn't look at him. She stared at the road, her jaw set. "My name is Isabella Moretti, and tonight I just started a war." They drove for 2 hours, heading deep into the rural countryside, far away from the cameras and the digital grid of the city. They ditched the truck in a dense patch of woods and walked another 3 miles to a dilapidated hunting cabin that looked abandoned. Sarah, Isabella, broke the lock on the back door with a rock and ushered Mark inside. It was musty, filled with dust sheets, but it was dry. "My father bought this place under a shell company 20 years ago," she said, pulling the curtains tight. "Safe house number 4. Nobody knows about it except me." Mark collapsed onto a dusty sofa. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a crushing exhaustion and a deep, aching sense of betrayal. "Isabella Moretti," Mark said, testing the name. It tasted bitter. "The Moretti crime family. New Jersey syndicate?" "Yes." She turned to face him. She looked exhausted, her nursing scrubs covered in sewer filth, but her posture was regal, defiant. My father was the Don. Luca Valenti was the heir to the rival family. Our marriage was supposed to be the peace treaty, the union that would merge the East Coast operations. And you ran, Mark said. I found out what they were planning, she said quietly. It wasn't just a merger. Luca planned to kill my father and my brothers at the wedding reception. A red wedding-style takeover. I couldn't stop it with force, so I stopped it with leverage. The account numbers, Mark recalled. Luca mentioned them. The ledger, she corrected. The digital keys to the Valenti offshore accounts. Billions of dollars. I memorized the encryption sequence and erased the files from their servers. I became the only key. If they killed me, they lost their fortune. If they married me, they'd eventually torture it out of me. So I ran. I became Sarah. I met a kind, sweet man who liked grilled cheese sandwiches and didn't own a gun. Her voice cracked. I fell in love with you, Mark. That part was real, the only real thing in my life. Mark stood up, anger flaring hot in his chest. Real? Sarah, our entire marriage is built on a lie. You put me in danger every single day. If I hadn't left my phone at home tonight, if you hadn't left your phone, you'd be dead, she snapped. They track phones, Mark. They found us because someone tipped them off to your location, and they pinged a device near you. I didn't have a device. Someone near you did, she said darkly. Think, Mark. Who knew you were going to dinner? Who knew you were leaving your phone behind? Mark froze. The memory of the evening replayed in his mind. The rusty anchor, the steak, the whiskey. Liam. Liam, Mark whispered. No way. He's my best friend. He's the godfather to our future kids. Liam has a gambling problem, Mark, Sarah said softly. I saw the notices in the mail when I went to his house for the BBQ last month. Final notices. Big numbers. People like Luca. They find people like Liam. They buy them. Mark felt sick. He asked me why I looked relaxed. I told him I left my phone. He texted someone right after I said that. I thought he was just checking work. He was signaling the hit team, Sarah said. They went to the house to grab me, expecting you to be distracted for 2 hours. They didn't expect you to come home early because you missed your phone, or maybe they planned to kill you when you got back. Mark paced the small room. His world was shattering. His wife was a mob princess. His best friend was a traitor, and a psychopath was hunting them. So what now? Mark asked, looking at her. We hide here forever? No, Sarah said. Her eyes changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. We can't run anymore. Luca won't stop. He can't. Without the money, his own lieutenants will turn on him within a week. He's desperate. So we go to the FBI. The FBI is compromised. Half the field office is on Luca's payroll. That's why I never went to them. She walked over to Mark and took his hands. We have to finish this ourselves. We have to destroy him. How? The ledger, she said. I have the encryption key in my head. But to use it, to drain his accounts and expose him to the international authorities who aren't on his payroll, I need access to the Valenti mainframe. And where is that? She hesitated. It's in the penthouse of the Valenti Casino in Atlantic City, in Luca's private office. Mark laughed, a hysterical manic sound. You want us to break into a mafia-run casino, go to the boss's office and hack his computer? No, Sarah said. I want you to walk in the front door. The plan was insane. It was suicidal, and it was their only shot. The drive to Atlantic City took 4 hours in a stolen sedan they hot-wired at a truck stop. Mark watched in horror as Sarah did this with a nail file. By the time they reached the city limits, the sun was rising over the ocean, painting the sky in bloody streaks of orange and purple. "Listen to me," Sarah said, as they parked in a public garage 3 blocks from the Golden Palace Casino. "Luca thinks I have the key. He thinks you are just a civilian, a liability. He doesn't respect you. That is your weapon." She reached into the back seat and pulled out a duffel bag they had found in the hunting cabin. Inside were old clothes, suits from the 90s. Mark pulled on a jacket. It was tight, but it made him look less like a tech CEO and more like a desperate gambler. "Liam is the link," Sarah explained. "If Liam sold us out, he's waiting for his payout. He's likely here, or close by, waiting to meet Luca." Mark pulled the brim of a baseball cap down. "I call Liam. I tell him I escaped. I tell him I have you, and I want to make a deal." "Exactly," Sarah said. "You offer to trade me for your life and $10 million. You appeal to his greed." Mark felt bile rise in his throat. "I have to tell him I'm selling you out? You have to make him believe it. You have to sound like a coward, Mark. Can you do that?" Mark looked at his wife. He thought about the fear he felt in the warehouse. He thought about the life they had lost. "I can do it," he said. They found a payphone, a relic on the boardwalk. Mark dialed Liam's number. It rang twice. "Mark?" Liam's voice was panicked, breathless. "Mark, oh my God, are you okay? The news said there was a shooting at the docks." "Cut the crap, Liam," Mark said, channeling every ounce of CEO ruthlessness he possessed. I know you set me up." Silence on the other end. Then Liam's voice changed. It became cold. "You were supposed to just stay at dinner, Mark. It wasn't supposed to get messy." "Well, it is messy. I have her. She's tied up in the trunk of a car." You have Sarah?" "I have Isabella," Mark corrected. "And I know who she is now. I don't want a mob war, Liam. I just want my life back, and I want compensation for my house being a crime scene." "Where are you?" "Atlantic City. I'm bringing her to Luca, but I want a guarantee. I want you to meet me in the lobby of the Golden Palace. You bring me to Luca. If I see anyone else, I put a bullet in her head and dump her in the ocean. The codes die with her." Liam hesitated. Okay, Mark. You're being smart. Meet me at the high roller entrance in 30 minutes. Mark hung up. He looked at Sarah, who was hiding behind a kiosk. She nodded. He took the bait. 30 minutes later, Mark stood in the opulent lobby of the Golden Palace. He felt exposed, naked without a weapon. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. She was entering through the staff entrance, using an old keycard she prayed still worked on the service elevators. Liam appeared. He looked terrible, sweaty, pale, wearing a crumpled suit. He rushed over to Mark. "Where is she?" Liam hissed. "In the parking garage, locked in. I give you the location once I see Luca." "He's upstairs," Liam said, checking his watch nervously. "He's getting patched up from the gunshot. He's furious, Mark. You need to tread carefully. Take me to him." Liam led Mark to the private elevator. He scanned a card, and the doors slid open. As they ascended, the silence was thick. "Why, Liam?" Mark asked, staring at the numbers climbing. 10 years of friendship. "I owed them 400 grand, Mark," Liam whispered, staring at the floor. "They were going to break my legs. Then they were going to go after my mum. It was you or me. I chose me." "I hope it was worth it," Mark said coldly. The elevator dinged. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office. It was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic. In the center of the room, sitting behind a mahogany desk, was Luca. His arm was in a sling. 2 massive bodyguards stood by the door. "The prodigal husband," Luca sneered. "Liam tells me you've come to your senses." "I'm a businessman," Mark said, stepping into the room. "I cut my losses. She's a liability." "Where is she?" Luca demanded. "Transfer $10 million to this account," Mark said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "And I tell you where the car is." Luca laughed. He picked up the paper, crumbled it, and threw it at Mark. "You think you're in a position to negotiate? You're in my building. You're a dead man walking." Luca nodded to the guards. "Beat it out of him." The 2 guards stepped forward. Mark's heart hammered. "Come on, Sarah, come on." Suddenly, the lights in the office flickered. The large screen behind Luca's desk, which was displaying stock prices, went black. Then, a face appeared on the screen. It was Sarah. She was sitting in the server room, illuminated by the blue glow of racks. "Hello, Luca." Her voice boomed through the office speakers. Luca jumped up. "What is this?" "I'm bypassing your firewall," Sarah said calmly. "I'm currently uploading the entire Valenti ledger to the FBI, Interpol, and the IRS. You have about 60 seconds before every agency on Earth gets a copy." "Stop it!" Luca screamed, grabbing a handgun from his drawer. He pointed it at Mark. "Tell her to stop or I kill him." "Go ahead." Sarah's voice was icy. "Kill him. He's just a distraction." Mark looked at Liam. Liam looked terrified. "Liam?" Mark said calmly. "You have his phone, don't you? The one I left at home?" Liam blinked. "What? No, You took it from the house," Mark lied, improvising wildly. "Sarah tracked it. She's not in the server room, Luca. She's recording this from the police station." Luca swung his gun toward Liam. "You idiot! You led them here?" "No, he's lying!" Liam shrieked. It was enough of a distraction. As Luca turned, Mark grabbed a heavy crystal decanter of scotch from the rolling bar cart next to him and smashed it into the face of the nearest bodyguard. Chaos erupted. Mark's hand tightened around the neck of the crystal decanter. It was heavy, leaded glass, filled with amber scotch that cost more than his first car. In the reflection of the glass, he saw his own distorted face, sweaty, terrified, but hardening into something unrecognizable. "Do it, Mark!" Sarah's voice crackled from the wall speakers, distorted by static but piercingly loud. "Drop the facade!" Luca turned, his eyes narrowing. "Facade?" That split second of confusion was all Mark needed. He didn't throw the decanter. He swung it like a club. He put every ounce of his repressed anger, every late night at the office, every lie he'd been told in the last 6 hours into the motion. The crystal impacted the nearest bodyguard's face with a sickening, wet crunch. The glass didn't just break, it detonated. Shards of crystal and a spray of alcohol blinded the man instantly. He howled, a guttural sound of pure agony, and stumbled backward, his finger clamping down on the trigger of his submachine gun. Brrrrt! Bullets stitched a line across the ceiling, raining plaster dust and debris down on the mahogany furniture. Mark dove behind the heavy leather sofa, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard it felt like it was trying to bruise him from the inside. "Kill him! Kill him now!" Luca roared, clutching his wounded shoulder. His face was a mask of purple rage, veins bulging in his neck. "Don't just stand there!" By the elevator, Liam was hyperventilating. The gunfire had snapped something in him. The self-preservation instinct that had led him to sell out his best friend now screamed at him to run. He lunged for the elevator panel, his hands shaking so violently he missed the button twice. "I'm out! I'm out!" Liam screamed, slamming his palm against the down arrow. Luca spun around. The sight of the fleeing accountant, the rat who had chewed through the ropes of loyalty, was the final insult. "You coward!" Luca hissed. He raised his handgun. his aim steady despite his injury. "Liam, get down!" Mark yelled from behind the couch. It was too late. Bang! The sound was singular and final. The bullet caught Liam square in the center of his back. Mark watched, time seeming to slow down, as his best friend, the man who had toasted him at his wedding, who had held his secrets, who had just betrayed him for a gambling debt, slammed against the brushed steel doors. Liam slid down slowly, leaving a streak of bright crimson against the metal. He turned his head, his eyes wide, locking onto Mark's across the room. There was no hate in them anymore, just shock, and a terrible, childish fear. Then the light went out of them. Mark felt a scream build in his throat, a primal roar of grief and fury. But he swallowed it down. It tasted like bile and ash. There was no time to mourn. Mourning was for the survivors, and Mark wasn't a survivor yet. "Sarah!" Mark screamed at the screen, his voice cracking. "Now! Burn it all down!" On the wall screen, Sarah's face was grim. She typed a final command. "Goodbye, Luca." The penthouse plunged into absolute darkness. Sarah hadn't just cut the lights, she had killed the entire grid for the casino. The hum of the air conditioning died. The ambient glow of the electronics faded. The only light came from the faint, ghostly reflection of the Atlantic City skyline filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across the room. In the sudden void, the silence was terrifying, broken only by the groans of the blinded bodyguard and the heavy, ragged breathing of Luca. Mark knew he had seconds before they adjusted to the dark. He knew the layout of the room. He began to crawl, his knees scraping against the hardwood, moving away from the sofa. He could smell the spilled scotch, the metallic tang of blood, and the sharp scent of ozone from the gunfire. "I can hear you, Reynolds," Luca hissed in the dark. His voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You're breathing like a dying dog. You think the dark helps you? I was born in the dark." A beam of light sliced through the room. The second bodyguard, the one who hadn't been hit, had pulled a tactical flashlight. The beam swept over the sofa where Mark had been just seconds ago. "Clear," the guard grunted, his voice professional, detached. "Check behind the desk," Luca ordered, racking the slide of his pistol. "And when you find him, shoot him in the stomach. I want it to last." Mark was crouched behind a marble pedestal near the window. He was cornered. He had no weapon. He was a tech CEO in a ruined suit, fighting men who killed for a living. He needed a distraction. He needed chaos. He looked at the marble bust on the pedestal, a heavy, Roman-style head. He gripped it with both hands, his muscles straining. As the flashlight beam swung toward him, Mark heaved the stone bust not at the guard, but directly at the massive glass pane behind Luca's desk. Crash! The sound was cataclysmic. The reinforced glass shattered outward, unable to withstand the heavy impact. Instantly, the room was assaulted by the elements. The wind from the Atlantic Ocean, 30 stories up, howled into the penthouse like a physical blow. It was a vortex of cold air and deafening noise. Papers from the desk whipped up into a frenzy, creating a blinding paper snowstorm in the flashlight's beam. The heavy velvet curtains whipped violently. "What is he doing?" Luca screamed, shielding his face from the gale. Mark didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the storm. He tackled the bodyguard from the blind side. It wasn't a graceful, cinematic takedown. It was a desperate, flailing collision of bodies. They hit the floor hard. The guard was heavier, a wall of muscle, and he smelled of stale tobacco and sweat. He grunted, swinging the heavy flashlight into Mark's ribs. Crack! Mark gasped, pain exploding in his side, but adrenaline flooded his system, numbing the agony. He wasn't fighting for a merger. He was fighting for his life. He jammed his thumb into the guard's eye socket, gouging with animalistic desperation. The guard screamed, dropping the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the floor, illuminating flashes of the room. Liam's body, the overturned chairs, the blood on the carpet. Mark scrambled for the guard's gun, his fingers brushing the cold steel. He gripped it, rolled onto his back, and fired. Bang! Bang! He didn't aim. He just pulled the trigger until the weight on top of him went limp. Mark shoved the body off, gasping for air, his lungs burning. He scrambled to his feet, swaying unsteadily. He held the gun up, aiming into the swirling wind and darkness. "It's over, Luca," Mark yelled, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "The police are coming. The data is out. You're finished." "You think the police scare me?" Luca's voice came from the broken window. A flash of lightning from the storm outside illuminated the room for a split second, freezing the scene in a strobe-light horror. Luca was standing on the narrow balcony ledge, the wind whipping his bloody suit jacket around him like a cape. He looked like a demon, his eyes manic, a grin of pure insanity plastered across his face. "I built this city," Luca shouted, stepping back toward the edge. "I own the judges. I own the DA. I don't go to jail, Reynolds. I am the Valenti family, and if I go down, you're coming with me." Luca raised his gun, leveling it at Mark's chest. Mark squeezed the trigger of the guard's gun. Click. Mark froze. He squeezed again. Click. Empty. The guard had spent the magazine spraying the ceiling. Luca laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. "The house always wins, Mark. Always." Mark stared down the barrel of Luca's gun. He thought of Sarah. He thought of the quiet dinners he would never have again. He closed his eyes, waiting for the flash. Screech! The sound of metal tearing against metal echoed through the room. The elevator doors, which had been locked down by the hack, were being pried open with a crowbar. Mark opened his eyes. Isabella Moretti stood in the elevator doorway. She wasn't the Sarah who knitted scarves. She was wearing a Kevlar vest over her scrubs, her face streaked with grease from the elevator shaft she had just climbed down. In her hands, she held a Remington 870 pump-action shotgun she'd taken from the security locker. "The house is closed, Luca," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the wind like a razor. Luca turned, his eyes widening in genuine disbelief. "Bella!" Boom! She didn't hesitate. She didn't offer a monologue. She fired a single round into the ceiling directly above Luca's head. Plaster, concrete, and steel rebar rained down on him. It wasn't a kill shot. It was a statement. It was a distraction. Luca flinched. He stumbled backward, his Italian leather shoes slipping on the rain-slicked marble of the balcony ledge. He flailed, his arms grasping desperately at the wet air. For 1 second, time seemed to stop. His eyes locked onto Sarah's. There was no fear in them, only a sudden, profound realization that he had underestimated the girl he tried to cage. Then, gravity took over. He didn't scream. He just vanished into the night, plummeting 30 stories down to the neon-lit boardwalk below. Mark lowered the empty gun. He walked slowly to the broken window, the glass crunching under his feet. He looked down. Far below, amidst the flashing lights of the boardwalk, a crowd was beginning to gather around a dark, broken shape on the pavement. Mark slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He looked at Sarah. She was lowering the shotgun, her hands trembling for the first time. She walked over to him, stepping over the debris and the bodies. She didn't hug him. She didn't kiss him. She knelt beside him and checked his pupils, her nurse training taking over automatically. "We have 3 minutes before the SWAT team breaches the stairwell," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We need to be the victims. Drop the gun, lie down, look traumatized." Mark looked over at the elevator, where Liam's body lay still. He felt tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging against his cold cheeks. "I don't have to act, Sarah," he whispered, his voice broken. "I am traumatized." The next 6 months were a blur of depositions, witness protection interviews, and media frenzies. The casino shootout was the headline of every paper in the country. Mark Reynolds, the tech CEO, and his wife Sarah, the hidden mafia princess who took down the Valenti crime family. They were heroes, and they were strangers. Mark sat in a small cafe in Florence, Italy. It was raining. He stirred his espresso, watching the water run down the cobblestone streets. He wasn't Mark Reynolds anymore. Legally, his name was Thomas Hale. He had a beard now, and he wore glasses he didn't need. The chair opposite him scraped back. Sarah, now known as Eleanor, sat down. She looked different. Her hair was cut short, dyed a deep auburn. She wore a trench coat and looked every bit the European local. They hadn't lived together since that night. The FBI had separated them for debriefing, and then the reality of who she was had set in. Mark couldn't go back to watching Netflix on the couch with a woman who knew how to hotwire cars and handle a shotgun. "You look good," she said, her voice hesitant. "I look like a geography teacher," Mark joked weakly. "How are you?" "I'm okay. The government seized the Valenti assets. The money I stole, I gave it back. Most of it." "Most of it?" Mark raised an eyebrow. She smiled, a flash of the old mischief. "I kept a consulting fee. It's in a trust for Liam's mother. She'll never have to worry about rent again. Anonymously, of course." Mark nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "That's good. She thinks he died a hero, a bystander caught in the crossfire." "Let her believe it," Sarah said. They sat in silence for a long time. The rain tapped against the cafe awning. "I miss it sometimes," Mark admitted. "The quiet, the boring dinners, the phone buzzing on the counter." "I miss you," Sarah said. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "I really loved you, Mark. That wasn't a lie. The 10 years. That was the only time I felt safe." "I know," Mark said. He looked at her hand. No wedding ring. He wasn't wearing his either. "Can we go back?" she asked. "Not to Oak Creek, not to Reynolds Tech, but to us?" Mark looked out at the rain. He thought about the man he was before he left his phone on the counter. That man was naive. He was soft. That man was dead. But the man sitting here? He was a survivor. And he was sitting across from the only person in the world who understood what it felt like to have your life burn down in a single night. "We can't go back," Mark said softly. Sarah pulled her hand away, her eyes dropping. "But," Mark continued, "we can start something new." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a ring. He pulled out a phone, a burner phone. "I bought a phone," he said. "First one in 6 months. And I don't have anyone to call," he smiled. "Except you." Sarah laughed, tears shining in her eyes. "Well, Thomas Hale, would you like to get dinner? I know a place, but you have to promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Bring your phone," she said. "I don't want you coming home early and finding any more surprises." Mark laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the first one in a long time. "Deal." They walked out of the cafe together, sharing an umbrella, disappearing into the winding streets of Florence. They weren't the couple from the suburbs anymore. They were something sharper, harder, and perhaps more real. Because sometimes you have to lose everything, your identity, your friends, your safety, to find out who is actually standing next to you when the lights go out. Mark and Sarah's story reminds us that we never truly know the people we share our lives with. We build our little worlds, our routines and our safety nets, assuming that tomorrow will be just like today. But a single decision, like leaving a phone on a counter, can pull the thread that unravels the entire tapestry. Mark thought he was just taking a break from technology. Instead, he stepped into a nightmare that forced him to become a warrior to save the woman he loved, only to realize the woman he loved was the warrior all along. In the end, they survived the mafia, the betrayal of a best friend, and the destruction of their old lives. But the question remains, can you ever truly trust someone again after discovering their entire existence was a fabrication? They are trying, one rainy day in Italy at a time. What a ride. I have to ask you guys a serious question. If you found out your partner was secretly hiding a massive, dangerous past like Sarah, would you stay with them? Or would you run? And be honest, would you have forgiven Liam for what he did? Or did he get what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, it really helps the channel grow, and hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.